Hey, 7th grade. So what you're going to be doing is using this video to fill out this to fill out this column of the notes sheet that you started in at home. This is the vocab sheet that you copy and pasted into. All right, and then we're going to review it in a little more detail during class time. So use this video to type directly into the document. Okay, so the first vocab word we had here is trait. And I simplified the definition from the website, so it said it's a specific characteristic of an organism. The one thing I'll add to this is that it is inherited from biological parents. Okay, so for example, language is not a trait because it's not inherited. You learn it. So examples would be eye color, hair color, skin color, any number of things like that. You could have hair type, curly, etc. Now, what's a gene? It says over here that the gene is the basic physical unit of inheritance, and it's passed from parents to offspring, containing the information needed to specify traits. That's a very complicated way of saying that genes control traits, right? So specifically, it is a section of DNA that controls a particular trait. Now, I think I mentioned once that usually it's multiple genes that control a certain trait. So multiple genes control your hair, multiple genes control your eye color, but there are some traits that are controlled by just a single gene. So to show this a different way, this is DNA. This is one small section of DNA, and we'll learn more about this later. Now, DNA contains a code for all the traits you have. Now, if you look, this is a longer section of DNA. It does get wrapped up into a unit called a chromosome. We'll learn more about this later. It's just a sort of a section of a big collection of DNA. Now, a gene is just one section of that DNA. So you could look through your DNA just like you'd look through a book and look for a sentence that is about your eye color. And that's that gene. That's how you can identify particular genes for particular traits, like color blindness or propensity for certain diseases. Is you're just looking for a section of the DNA and seeing what it says. So that's why it's here. It's a section of DNA that controls a trait. Now, genotype. A genotype is an individual's collection of genes. Another way of saying that is that it is sort of what's in your actual DNA. It is the code in the DNA controlling a trait. Now, it is usually expressed as two letters together. Let me give you an example. So just two letters would be like that. They're always the same letter for reasons you'll see why later. R and R could be another example of a genotype. Maybe that might control your whatever, how round your eyes are. Another one could be, say, T and lowercase t. Those letters are totally arbitrary. They're just assigned to a particular gene. Now, why are there two? We'll talk about this more in class. The reason why there are two is because they are a combination of the organism's biological father and biological mother, the sperm and the egg. So, for example, the sperm might give a capital B, which might be for, say, brown eyes, and the egg might give a lowercase b that might say blue eyes, and together the big B and the little b combine to make the genotype for someone's eye color. Right? So I'll write over here underneath two letters because one from sperm that made you, other from egg. Okay. Everyone say sperm. Very good. Okay, so now what's phenotype? If genotype is the code that controls your traits, that's what's in your DNA, phenotype is, as it says over here, the observable traits. That's actually how the genotype gets expressed. This is how the genotype appears in physical form. So for example, big B, little b, just to make example, that could be genotype for eye color, brown eyes, equals phenotype for eye color. So the genotype controls the phenotype. Genotype controls phenotype. All right? We're moving on to the second page here. All right, the first word is allele. This is the word that people struggle with the most in genetics vocab. I'm not sure why. It's actually not that complicated of a concept, as you'll see. An allele is one of two or more versions of a gene. And an individual inherits two alleles from each gene, one from each parent. So this is what we talked about over here, right? Two letters, because one comes from, I should have said, from the sperm, and the other comes from the egg, one from each biological parent. So what's an allele? Let's probably an easier way to think about it is this. What are the alleles for eye color? What are the versions of the gene for eye color? All of you can think of some. Brown, green, blue. Those are all eye color alleles. They're all versions of a gene, right? Let's do hair color, or sorry, hair type alleles. Straight, curly, wavy, right? So those are versions of the hair type gene. Those are versions, alleles of the eye color gene. And you get one from each parent, biological parent. So for example, you might get a capital B, which signifies, say, brown eyes that's the brown eye allele from a mother, and a lowercase b, let's say blue eyes from the sperm, from the father, okay? All right, so now there are two different types of alleles we're going to talk about here, dominant and recessive. I don't like the definition from this website, so we'll work with it though. It says if the alleles of the gene are different, one allele is expressed, it is the dominant gene. All right, so that means that, for example, here, let's give you this. If dominant allele is present, it appears. So all right, so that means that, here, let's actually keep going. So let's say, and it is shown as a capital letter. All right, so we're going to put this together now with what we did before. So for example, let's say capital B equals the allele for brown eyes. All right, let's say that capital, capital R equals the allele for round eyes. Let's just go with eyes. Okay, let's just say that. That means that, to scooch up over here, you get one allele from the sperm, one allele from the egg. If you have the capital B, if you have the dominant allele for brown eyes, it will always appear. It will mask the recessive one. That's the lowercase b. Okay, so let's actually look at that, and then we'll review it one more time. Right? So if a dominant allele is present, it appears. It's the opposite for a recessive. As it says over here, the dominant allele will be expressed, the recessive is masked. So this is going to be covered by the dominant allele. Right? So now it is shown as lowercase letters. So for example, let's just say lowercase b, we'll arbitrarily assign that to be blue eyes. Let's make lowercase r will be, well, instead of round eyes, we'll go with let's just go with almond eyes, right? So now that means, to go back over here, if you have capital B, lowercase b. That means you have one brown eye allele from the, say, egg. You have a lowercase b, one blue eye allele, say, from the sperm. And when you combine them, because there is a capital B, brown eyes, it's going to cover up the blue eyes. So you might be carrying the gene or the allele for blue eyes, but it might not show up because the brown eye is dominant and it will cover it up. Let's think about this round almond shaped one. So round is capital R, it is dominant, and we'll say lowercase r is almond. I'm not even sure what that means, but whatever. So if you have two capital R's, now in that case, obviously you're going to have round eyes. But if you had uppercase R, lowercase r, the almond eye one would be covered up by the dominant capital R. Okay? All right, let's put a couple more things onto this. So homozygous. Homozygous is a genetic condition where an individual inherits the same alleles from both parents. Now, if you think about the prefix homo, probably the most common place you see is homosexual. Homosexual means you are attracted to people of the same sex. Now, homo means same as a prefix. So that means probably the easiest way to show that is that if you have two capital B's or two lowercase b's, those are both examples of homozygous genotypes. Right? Those are both homozygous genotypes because they're the same. In fact, let's do it one more time just to be clear. Right? That's a homozygous genotype. RR, same thing, also a homozygous genotype. So if homozygous means same, heterozygous, what do you think? It says it's inherited different forms of a gene from each parent. So heterosexual means you're attracted to the opposite sex. So big B, little b, that is called a heterozygous genotype. What's another example of a heterozygous genotype? Big case, uppercase, lowercase r. So it's always going to be where one's uppercase and one's lowercase. So now, what we're going to do when we come to class is actually start making some babies. What that means is we're going to see what happens when we cross, for example, someone who has a homozygous genotype, say big B, with someone who has a heterozygous genotype. And they're going to have some babies, and we're going to see how those line up and what happens to the babies. Now, one thing I want to add, like I said, these letters are completely arbitrary letters. I tend to pick letters that have very easily distinguishable uppercase and lowercase letters. So you wouldn't want to pick, say, an uppercase and lowercase T. Or T is good. T is uppercase and lowercase, they look different. W is bad, they look the same. X is bad, they look the same. And when you're handwriting it, you can't tell if it's uppercase or lowercase. Z is bad, S is bad. What are some good ones to use? R, T, what else that look very different? B. So that's why we tend to stick with a certain series of letters. It's really no other reason other than that. Okay? So if you don't fully understand this, don't sweat it. It will become clearer when we come back to class.